Hello, my name is Donald Cruz. I'm a reference librarian at the Delhi Township branch of the Public Library of Cincinnati and Hamilton County. This afternoon I'm interviewing Mr. John Coakley, a veteran of the Second World War. It is Veterans Day, November the 11th, 2006. We are at the Delhi Township branch of the Public Library of Cincinnati and Hamilton County, and there's nobody here but Mr. Coakley and myself. John, first of all, thank you for agreeing to do this interview and to share some of your memories and experiences from the Second World War. You are the first person I've had the pleasure of talking to doing these interviews who was in the Air Service.
Oh, is that right?
So let's go back here a little bit in your background. Before the war, what were you doing?
Well, I worked on a gas station for a couple of years, and then and that was until it's in the National Guard. We were federalized in January of 1941.
Okay.
For the year.
So well before the war, before the United States got into the war, but the rest of the war was certainly in the middle of it.
Yeah. And we were stationed down in Camp Edwards, Cape Cod.
Obviously, from your accent, you are obviously a New Englander. I can tell that by your accent. Where are you from originally, sir?
I was from Malden and Medford, Massachusetts, just outside of Boston.
Okay. So you're working at a gas station and in a National Guard unit. What was your rank at that time?
I started off as a private first class,
Okay.
and when I went to cadet school, I was a master sergeant.
Okay.
What was I going to say? Oh, in the year we were on national duty, national service, we trained at Camp Edwards for most of the early part of 1941. In the last few months, 3 or 4 months, we were on maneuvers down in the south, in the Carolinas and Tennessee.
Okay.
We got back from Carolinas on December 5th, Friday.
Yes.
When a lot of our older fellows who were married were going to get out Monday.
No.
And of course we had Sunday.
Yes.
Everyone was frozen. In January, the Air Force stopped the 2-year college requirement to become a cadet. And they allowed any soldier in the country to volunteer to take a test if they wanted to become a pilot, bombardier, or a navigator.
Okay. So this is strictly for air service. Right. Okay.
So I took it with several hundred other fellows from Camp Edwards and passed the test.
Okay.
It's the happiest day of my life.
All right.
Because I always wanted to be a pilot.
All right. So then they sent you to OCS.
We went to Kelly Field, the ground school.
Where's that?
It's called Pre-Flight. It's Kelly Field in San Antonio, Texas.
Okay.
You know.
So you didn't go. So that's where you went. You didn't have. That was OCS was included as part of that experience.
We had to go to ground school, physical education, learn the engine instruments, and aircraft identification.
So that was general air.
This is all pre-flight.
Okay.
It took about a month. After we finished that, we were assigned to a flying school.
Okay.
And I was assigned to Parks Air College in East St. Louis.
All right.
Which was so fortunate. I wrote to Parks Air College when I was in high school to find out about their course, flying course.
So this flying thing was something you'd thought about long before the war.
I was thinking about flying a long time.
Okay.
Of course, they sent back the message that it was a $5,000 course. So I forgot about that.
Back when $5,000 was a lot of money. A lot of money.
We didn't have much. But anyway, fortunately,
so you made it through the back door, as it were.
I did get to Parks Air College.
Okay.
It was primary training. We had to go to ground school too, with engine instruments again and stuff, navigation. But what was I going to say?
What kind of planes were you training on?
We were training on a Fairchild P-19. It was a low-wing monoplane, and it had a hood. I was up in St. Louis in December. It was pretty cool. Most of the other schools had a biplane. They had
A lot of people still
steerman
using
biplanes.
Steermans, right? Were still using
Yeah.
at that time.
But we were these had just come online,
Okay.
so we flew those. We
And this
stayed
is
in basic.
This
Yeah.
plane was designed as a training plane?
What's that?
The plane that you trained on was designed as a training aircraft. Is
Yeah.
that correct? Okay.
They had no instruments on it to speak of, just a compass and some attitude instruments.
An altimeter, I assume?
You know, the straight and level and
Right.
all that stuff. But yeah, we had 6 or 7 hours of instruction, and then we had a solo.
Oh my goodness.
So-
That was quick.
Yeah, well, we soloed and I passed that part. And then on our own time, we had to practice what we were taught, you know, loops and spins and Emmelmans, all that tricky stuff.
Right?
So, and then from there, we went to basic training. The plane was a little bigger and it had more instruments. And we did the same training, low level cross countries. That was about another 30 days. We got about 30 hours of training.
Do you remember what kind of plane that was?
Well, that was a Beechcraft, but it was a little heavier and some more instruments.
Okay.
The plane
Still a
kept getting bigger.
single or double engine?
It was single engine.
Single engine.
From there, we went to advanced training down in Foster Field, Texas, Victoria. And there it got bigger. We had all the instruments then, radio for navigation. We had a 50 millimeter machine gun in the wing, which we had air gunnery.
Right.
We did that on Matagorda Island in the Gulf. You know, on April 22nd, we graduated and got our wings. Big day.
Yeah, yes, indeed. Also,
We were all
awfully
assigned-
quick too.
Huh?
Awfully quick too, from January to April.
Oh, yeah, it was. From there, we were assigned to a combat school, and I was sent to Austin, Texas, to train at the C-47, the transport.
Okay.
All through training, at primary, basic, and advanced, they said, "What do you want to fly when you go?" And I told them, I want to be a fighter pilot. I think our whole class went into transport, but it's what they needed.
That's what they
That's
needed.
the way they did, yeah. And after I checked out on the C-47, I had to go to combat training in the C-47 down in Grenada, Mississippi.
Okay.
We had a lot of formation flying, low-level flying, more things like that. We flew some troops just to have weight and see what it was like.
Right.
After graduating from there, we were either made a pilot, a co-pilot, and I was assigned to a combat crew as a pilot, and I had a co-pilot, a navigator, a radio man, and an engineer. He was a crew chief.
Okay.
And we went to Deerfield up in in Indiana.
Okay.
Can't I think of the name? Well, anyway, that's where we went.
Okay.
We picked up a brand new C-47 and flew it to Hamilton Field in San Francisco.
Right.
And there they loaded on 800-gallon tanks, 4 on each side of the fuselage inside. They're all tied into the main tanks. We had to have it to give us enough fuel to get to the Philippines, to Hawaii.
Okay.
At that time, it was a 16-hour flight. We took off at 9 o'clock in the evening and arrived in Hawaii 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I think it was. I think that comes to 13 hours.
That was a long flight.
It certainly was.
And was your first long-term experience flying over, I guess you're going over water when you were in the Gulf, but
Oh, yeah. We had some cross countries in combat training, down to Florida or up to New York and back to Mississippi and stuff. But this was a long flight.
Okay, so you went to Hawaii.
Yeah. We stayed in Hawaii 3 days when they took those tanks out and they filled it up with equipment that was needed at that time in New Guinea. And we happened to be carrying engine mounts for fighter planes. And then we went from Winfield in Hawaii to Christmas Isle, then down to the Fiji Isles, then down to New Caledonia.
Right.
And then we landed in Brisbane, Australia. I don't know how many days, it took almost a week to get there.
Right.
We were staying overnight. In Brisbane, they broke up our crew. We all went to different squadrons as needed.
Okay.
And myself and my radio man went to the 69th Troop Carrier Squadron in up at Port Moresby. The crew chief and the navigator and the co-pilot went to 3 different squadrons.
Okay.
So where can I go from there?
Okay, so that puts you at Port Moresby. We're in
That was a
New
start.
Guinea?
Huh?
That's New Guinea, right?
New Guinea, Port Moresby.
Right. All right, so that became where your squadron was based out of.
We were based there, and they had just captured and secured Nadzab, which is up in the Malcolm Valley, about the middle of New Guinea.
Okay. Which is about as far south as the Japanese got.
Yeah, well, we kept moving as they kept being pushed back.
Right.
Or they were either cut off, circled around them, and just let them stay there. They either died or gave up.
Ran out of the ability to
All
fight.
traffic to New Guinea from Japan was stopped.
Right.
Uh,
So what was the squadron you were assigned to? What were they doing? What was their assignment?
we were assigned to take equipment, mostly supplies, and personnel from Port Moresby to New Guinea, to Nadzab. And that was our primary job. We were moving all the squadrons up there. We had to take their tents, their jeeps, all equipment for their offices and everything, and move them all up there.
And were you going from landing field to landing field? You were able to where you were going, you could land the plane.
We went up every morning, not every morning, but somebody went up every morning. We had about 15 planes that flew up there and came back in the afternoon. We tried to get back in the afternoon before the clouds built up.
Right, from the heat of the day.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
C-47 was supposed to go over 10,000 feet. It would go to 12,000. I know I had one time I had to get up. I got up so high I had to pump air into the engine. And I finally saw the coast of southern New Guinea, peeled off and followed that, get down below the mountains.
And why had you had to go so high on that? Why had you had to fly so high on that mission?
Well, I got as high as 15,000 feet with it. But we couldn't stay there long because we had to oxygen. So I went down and just, when I saw the opening, I got down to the coast.
Why had you gone so high to start with? Why had you gone so high?
Because the cloud built up.
Okay, you're just getting
I
above
didn't
the...
want to get below it when you run into the mountain.
Right, okay, so just a navigation issue.
Yeah.
Okay. So then I assume as we began to make progress in the islands, did you start moving north?
We kept moving up as they secured bases. There was always a case again of moving supplies and equipment.
Right.
And usually we brought back wounded.
Right.
The ground troops. What was I going to say then? All these places were just being captured, like Ley, Finchhaven, and all the way up to Hollandia, where they had a big invasion for that.
Right.
And that's when we started our long flights. As soon as that was secured, it was a 5-hour trip up and a 5-hour trip back.
So you were still at Port Moresby was still the main place where you were flying
We were
out?
flying out of Nadzab then.
Oh, okay.
We were pretty secure there.
Right.
The only place that was still open on the airfield was Madang, which was just over the mountain. I think it was the Owen Stanley Range. in New Guinea.
In New Guinea, okay?
They were pretty secure, but they did get into us. And one of our pilots had a dogfight with about 3 of them
3 Japanese.
right over our own field.
Oh my goodness.
And his plane got shot up and he got shot in the hand, but he got down all right. And the Zeros were scattered out of there. That was one of the closest things to combat we had. On all our flights in the combat area, we always had cover.
Fighter planes in.
Fighter planes. We had a cover that was close to us at our level and a high cover. And you stayed with it. Of course, there was more planes than just one plane. It was a squadron. And they followed us to our destination.
Okay, now did you, so you moved a little bit further north, you're still in New Guinea.
Hollandia was captured. And most of the other places in between Azevano and Hollandia were bypassed. So there were pockets of Japanese
Right.
in between.
So if you had control of the seas, control of the air, they had very little ability to do anything, so. And if they didn't have, I assume places that had landing strips were probably priority areas to actually capture.
That's what we had to wait for. The engineers went in with their plows, leveled it,
CVs
put in
and
steel
whatever,
mats.
right?
One of the islands, Watkey, was a coral reef, and they smoothed that off. It was a beautiful landing strip. It was wide and long. Most of our landing strips in New Guinea were about 3,000 feet.
And how much room does a C-47 require to land?
There wasn't much.
About 3,000 feet, about every inch of it, huh?
That's right. But they got big up in some of those islands. It was pretty big. We got to Biak, and that was at the far end of the west end of New Guinea.
Right,
We were stationed. That became our next station.
okay,
That time, then the Battle of Leyte came,
okay.
and when that was secured, the field attacked Cloven on Leyte. We were flying from New Guinea to Philippines, up in Leyte.
Okay,
And we made it in 2 segments. We flew to Peleliu Island
right.
and over to Leyte. Yeah, that was another long flight. So we piled up a lot of combat time. A lot of
I was about to say you probably had a lot of flight hours.
Well, I have over 550 flight hours and over 150 combat missions. We got a lot of time in non-combat areas. Once the areas were secured, then it stopped being a combat area. And all our flying around that area was non-combat.
But you still had a lot of flight time.
We had a lot of flights though.
So I'm looking here in your records. It said you received the Distinguished Flying Cross. Is there a story behind how you had a particular event that caused you to receive the Distinguished Flying Cross?
It was a case of the number of combat missions. When you got 50 combat missions, you earned the Flying Cross. After that, you got air medals. And I got an air medal with 2 Oakley clusters, which was 3 air medals altogether.
And that was for?
Same thing, combat missions, combat.
So not directly related to a particular incident in the way that perhaps a Bronze Star or a Silver Star is
What?
not, usually a Bronze Star or a Silver Star is given for a particular incident in which you do something. This is
just
consistent,
getting
constant.
the supplies to where they were supposed to go and bringing back the wounded most of the time.
Okay.
When we got to Manila, when we were stationed in Leyte.
Okay.
But that was finally secured. That was our next post.
Right.
And we started getting closer to Manila. The next stop was Mindoro, and that was another combat area.
Right.
We were flying from Leyte to Mindoro. Then after that, we got up into the Philippines in Luzon, in Subic Bay. Now, we were flying from Enduro and Lady into
Right.
Subic Bay. And the prisoners of war were still over in Manila, in Santa Tomas. We had a flight one day when we went to Quezon City, which was just outside of Manila.
Okay.
They were still fighting in the walled city below, in south of Manila. And we went there to pick up the American prisoners of war to take them back to Lady. And I got into Santa Tomas University. And that's where they were through the whole war. Some of the babies were born there,
Right.
and some of the young children were grown into teenagers. They were there about 4 years, I think.
Right. Did that include troops who'd been at Corregidor, those troops?
Corregidor was over on the west coast of the bay,
Okay.
Manila Bay. And that was being taken at the same time.
Right.
What was I gonna say? But the poor prisoners of war, they looked so emaciated. Their clothes were pretty ragged at that time.
Right.
I don't think they were treated very well.
No. I think history has shown us
Yeah.
that was the case.
Well,
So then you flew them, they flew them back
they were
to,
going back and forth to Lady, to Manila. And then eventually the whole Manila area was secure. And next stop was up at Clark Field.
okay?
What were we doing there? We were still flying back and forth from Lady, most of our flights, to get all our equipment up there. We set up camp again,
Right.
and we get ready to go to Iwo Jima.
Okay.
This is about a year and a half after I got there, I think.
Right.
We, eventually Iwo Jima was captured also after a
Right.
horrible war. And when that was secure, we was flying into Iwo Jima.
Okay.
Shortly after that, Tokyo fell. The war was over.
Okay.
And our main job there was flying from Iwo to Tokyo back and forth, flying supplies and equipment.
For the occupation troops in
Yeah,
Japan.
We just landed at Tachikawa, outside of Tokyo. And then they moved us down to Atsubi. And that's where I came home from there. It was about 2 years, just 2 years, 25 months, I think.
A lot of things happened in those 2 years. A lot of things
Yeah, it
happened.
is.
So,
Well, we had, in New Guinea, we had R&I down in Sydney. We had a crew down there all the time. We just rotated. A crew flew down, 2 planes were down, 2 crews, and stayed there. The 1 crew came right back. And from then on, a plane went down with the crew, left the plane.
they got off the plane, the other
Yeah.
crew got on the plane and flew the plane
It
back.
just rotated. It was, we were going from Port Moresby at that time, down to Townsville in northern Australia,
Right.
then down to Sydney. And that was really a great time.
Your time to be young and
It was, it's places that you always thought about, you'd like to see. And I did get
I think it was a nice thing. Sydney had not actually suffered from, had never been attacked. It was,
Oh, yeah.
it wasn't really in a war zone. So it
No.
was, while Australia was at war,
They were close to being in trouble, Australia was. The Battle of the Coral Sea, which we won, thankfully.
thankfully,
It stopped the Japanese advance.
southward Japanese
And there
advance.
was some pretty vicious fighting with the Navy, Air Force, and also the ground forces in Buna and Doboduro on the tip of New Guinea. And that's where it was all stopped and things started in our
The
favor.
momentum changed and the direction went.
But in all that going through New Guinea, we were still going down Sydney on rotation.
Right.
And I had 3 trips down there. And when we got to the Philippines in Lady, the group sent one of our planes to go to Sydney for an administration trip. And the pilot that was assigned to go to it took me to be his co-pilot, which was really nice. It was
A real friend.
Great flight.
A real friend.
Well, we went from there to Darwin and then down to Sydney,
Right.
all across the outback and all that stuff. It was terrific.
I bet it
That
was.
was some of the high point, one high point. I enjoyed that. Bad times were when we lost 3 crews all of the 2 years I was there.
Out of your squadron.
Lost 3 airplanes and 3 crews.
Combat issues or mechanical or weather?
One of them flew into a mountain in the Philippines, was weather. 2 of them never came back. We totally missed it.
Just either they ran out of the fuel or
Our flights always took off in the dark in the morning.
right.
Yeah, we don't know whether they flew into a storm or something. I don't know if they could. We had no way to know whether they got shot down or not. But they just didn't show up. Too far, there's 10 people in our squadron. Well, it's 15 actually.
Did you ever have any? Did you ever have any close calls that you remember?
I would say my closest calls were weather. It really was my biggest. I was never afraid of flying over the jungle, but I was very concerned about it. Always thinking about what I'd do if I lost flight.
Where can I put down? Where can I put down? Right.
How was I going to land on the tree? I would have never jumped. I would never want to be down there.
All by your.
But it's such you couldn't. It's so hard to cut your way out.
Right.
You only go a few feet a day. It seems. It was so thick. You were fighter
Had
pilots.
you had any jungle training? Did they do any of that because of where you would be?
We actually not much. We didn't.
Right.
The fighter pilots that got it. They had we all had survival equipment.
Right.
Like the paddly rubber boats and things.
Right.
But the weather was the toughest. Coming back from Hollandia once, we were going into the Markham Valley and I could see it was just down on the ground. It was just, I said, we can't go that way. So I went out down the coast of New Guinea. And it was getting worse there too. And I didn't want to go above
The weather was
There
getting
was
bad.
no way of getting down. We couldn't see through it.
Right.
If you take a chance, come down, you might hit a mountain.
Right.
Well, we were getting close to Madang, and I knew that it was secure. We had a notice that it was secure about 2 days before that.
Right.
And we were about 5 minutes away from it. And I told the crew, I says, we got to go into Madang, and get on the ground fast. So we're in and landed. There were 2 more C-47s there.
You were not the only person with that
They had
idea.
the same problem. The weather was the big concern.
Was it a good plane to fly?
Oh, it was a great plane. It was really a great plane. I think they called it the Jeep of the Air Force. Because it was a workhorse.
Did that serve in both theaters? Was that in in Europe as well? Were there
What?
C-47s in the European theater as well?
They had them in the invasion fleet.
Okay.
At one spot in our trip, we changed from C-47 to C-46s. The C-47 had a 5,000-pound payload. The C-46 had a 10,000-pound payload. It was a bigger plane, had a big drop belly on the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
The cockpit was 21 feet in the air. And we checked out of those, and they eventually phased out. We were flying those at the end of the war.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was that a big change when you
liked
went from one to the other?
It was a new experience. Well, when I got to Tokyo on my last flight, we had to wait for a ride home on a boat. There were just too many airmen to get an airplane. They didn't have enough airplanes to do that.
Right.
We had a 12-day trip on a transport to get to San Francisco.
San Francisco. Okay.
It was, got a big reception there.
So you were still in. You did. When did you muster out of the? Or you stayed in a little while after the war, didn't you? Not long. Till 46, I believe your record here. You stayed in for a little while after the war.
When I got home, we were in San Francisco for a short while. I got home, went to Devon's, Fort Devens up in Massachusetts. And there I had a chance to stay in or get out. And I signed on for another year. And I was put in the ferry command at Long Beach, California. And I got married 10 days after I got home.
Was this a sweetheart who'd been waiting for you?
It was tougher than him than it was on me. It really was. But I was flying government, the C-47s and any plane I was qualified for. We were flying planes from one base to another. If a plane needed C-47, we'd fly it from Seattle to Texas, all the other type planes, B-13s. My longest flight was from Washington, state of Washington to New Jersey. And that was I think that was a 3-day trip. I was forced down in weather in Wyoming.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had other gas stops to get there. It was a break. I had a couple of days that I could fly up to Boston and see the family.
Right.
Then I flew home on the airlines back to California. A lot of times we had to take an airline flight to pick up the plane to fly.
Right.
And some places we didn't have another one to fly back, so we went back by airline.
That's an interesting.
We did that for a year.
This probably was not rough duty, though. That was comparatively easy duty, was it not?
I enjoyed it. It was tough on my wife because she was stuck all the time I was gone. And she was pregnant.
Where was she? Where was she?
In Long Beach.
Oh, so she wasn't even back in Massachusetts with the family.
Every time I had a flight, I had to go back to Long Beach, start all over.
Right.
A lot of weekend, a lot of ferry.
And when you got out of the service in late '46, what did you do? Just when you left the service?
Well, I was married. I had to go to work.
Drat.
And when I got sick, I got very sick. In fact, I almost died. I had mass peritonitis.
Oh.
And after about 30 days, well, I didn't think I was going to live. There was only one doctor of about out of 15 said I might have a chance. At that time, there was some experimental drug, streptomycin, I think. It was just an experimental thing.
Right.
And one of our doctors was able to get one of the doctors, from one of the schools that were testing.
Were you still in the service at that point?
No.
Okay. All right. So you got now that, right?
And they got enough streptomycin and it worked. They cut out a lot of the black stuff that was in it. And the streptomycin, about 30 days, I was back to. But I had a giant hernia. It was big.
Oh my goodness.
I didn't know what I was going to do for work or anything. And my brother-in-law, he was going to watchmaking school. He said, "Why don't you go to watchmaking school? You just sit there and fix watches." So I did that. And I did it on a GI Bill.
Right.
It was a 2-year course. I was able to go to school in the daytime. There was no homework. So I had a night job from a GE in a jet engine plant in Everett.
Washington.
Huh?
In Everett, Washington?
No, Everett, Massachusetts.
Oh, okay. Okay. You're back at home in Massachusetts, right?
Just outside of Boston.
Okay.
GE had a plant in Everett.
Okay.
And that's where I worked.
So you went from flying them to building them.
Yep, that's
Or
right.
at least part of them.
On a part of it, I worked on a certain part of combustion chamber.
Okay. And that's what you did for your career?
That was the end of my career. No, actually it wasn't. I joined the Air Force Reserve in the 50s.
Okay.
A friend of mine said, "Aren't you?" And I said, "No." And I was stationed at Bedford. And it worked like the National Guard, one weekend a month. Yeah,
2 weeks in the summer.
Yeah, on that.
Did you fly? Were you flying again?
Yes, fortunately and unfortunately. We were a troop carrier squadron in the reserve.
Right.
And they changed it to a fighter squadron.
Okay.
And we had to either get, if you didn't want to learn how to fly the fighter, you could get out. You know, or you could stay and train to fly a jet.
Okay.
They had for a jet, we had the F-80. It was the first jet.
Right.
And of course they were getting new models all the time, so the reserves got the F-80. We were supposed to train in P-51s.
Right.
Before we get into that. But before I got my turn on the P-51s, we got 2 T-33 training jets. So I got my first training in a training jet.
Right.
And I did check out in the F-80, which was just such a difference.
From multi.
Beautiful up high, quiet, fast. Well, I did go in a cross country down to Florida with another pilot with me. We were down there about a week. And while I was there, he asked me if I was checked out at night flying. I says, no. So he says, well, go ahead. He was a check pilot. He says, go take 3 landers off of Miami airport at night. So at 9 o'clock, I went up, made 3 landers, checked out on the night flight. Got that out of the way.
Right.
But my ending came in Bedford on a training flight. I had already checked out in the F-80. I went up one day on a training flight with another officer. And coming back to the airport, to our airport, it was closed because the jet had a flat tire on the runway. And they diverted us to Logan Airport in Boston.
Okay.
And I made a very bad landing. I come in and touched down with my nose wheel, which is, you shouldn't do. You're supposed to touch down on the main
Bang it
wheel
in.
and mush it in. Well, I touched down on my nose wheel. I don't know why I had this on tape. But I touched down with the nose wheel. And for all my habits of if you had a bounce of a C-47, you give it the gas and put the nose down and get speed. If you do this at a tricycle landing, you're supposed to pull it back and get
Back and get those
mush it down.
back wheels.
Well, I didn't do that. I instinctively went to the other way. And I went down there, and then I got a bigger bounce, and then I got a big bounce and went down like that. Tip tanks came off, the gear collapsed, and I broke my back. I had a compression fracture.
Oh my goodness.
The guy back of me didn't get hurt at all. The big problem I had at that was the emergency crank for the canopy was in my cockpit. I was up front. And because I broke it back, I couldn't crank it. And I didn't want to blow the canopy off because it might come back down on us.
Right. Yeah, because it's supposed to be blown out by your.
But I was afraid of a fire, but I think we didn't have much gas on. So there was no fire on the emergency crew there, very fast. And they took us over to the Chelsea Naval Air State Hospital. And I stayed there and got fixed up and wore a body cast for 6 months.
My goodness.
You know. And then couldn't fly anymore, only if it had a downward ejection. I couldn't fly anything that had an upward ejection. I might compress it again. But there wasn't anything that had it. Only one plane had it. I think it was a B-47. It had a downward ejection with the Union Trouble. So I got out. I had to wear a body cast for 6 months. And then I got out of the service.
Wow. But by that time you've flown a whole lot of different kinds of airplanes over actually a very short period of time.
Well, I got back to flying when I was about 69 years old. I got my private license over at Lincoln Airport. What happened on that? It was a small plane. It was a Piper plane. It was so light. It was nothing like this. We were flying loose in the air. And I stopped flying that. I said, I better. My wife was tearing. She said, what are you going back to that? So I did get up. And another thing, my hearing was going bad on me.
Right.
And I was having trouble with the controller.
Yeah.
And so it's the best thing to do.
Well, you certainly have had a lot of interesting experiences with that.
I enjoyed my military service. Great people I met, pilots.
Did you keep in touch with any of the guys you
Yes,
flew
I
with?
went to
or you
several
knew from?
reunions, but kept dropping off, you know. My flying class had their last reunion this past fall.
Right.
I didn't go to it, but there's going to be no more because there's not enough. There's only a few pilots who get there. The only ones who were going were some enlisted men and their families, and a few pilots with their, you know, their wives and their children and their grandchildren.
Right.
So they voted to close it and stop it. And they had, I think, $5,000 in their kitty, which they donated to the Air Museum up
Up to
in
date.
Dayton. Yeah.
Well, that was very generous. So you did keep in touch with those
yeah.
people, so that was a good way to do that.
And the guys I were closest to died off. I mean, there's only a few left that I really can remember. I know they're still living.
Right.
Let's say about one of those fellas that were killed over there in our squadron was my tent mate. You know, I was living with him all the
Right.
time.
Right.
That was a big blow.
Yes. Yeah, I'm sure that's tough. And
But there were a lot of. I was very grateful, you know, that I came home. So.
any other stories you got? Anything else anything else on your mind you want to share?
Huh?
Anything else on your mind you'd like to share about the whole experience?
Oh, I don't think so.
Do you remember hearing about the atom bomb? Do you remember when you got that?
No. I had a thing I did I maybe shouldn't have done. But I knew the atom bomb dropped, but I had no idea of the danger of these, you know, the fallout, radiation and all
Right.
that. But it was when I went on my last trip from the Iwo Jima. Geez, I don't know, I might get arrested. I didn't tell anybody about this, but I
It's
saw,
just between you and me and the camera in the Library of
I
Congress.
think a statute of limitations gone.
Probably.
I hope. But on my last flight, I knew it was my last flight, and I asked my crew, I said, this is my last flight. I don't know about you fellas, but I want to fly over Nagasaki and Hiroshima on the way up to Tokyo. It was just a short triangle.
Right.
They were glad. They said, fine. I didn't tell anybody. So I took off and I did fly over and I went over. And I don't think we were in any danger. It was a good 30 days after the bomb, I think.
Was it clear enough to see anything?
I didn't see much of Nagasaki because up kind of high because of the mountains. I just see the trees were just laying down, you know, the way.
Blown out.
I did get down low over Hiroshima. You know, you see that picture once in a while. Maybe one little building's there.
There's that one domed
We flew over that,
building.
about 200 feet, I think.
Oh my.
That's pretty high. For
That's still, I mean, close
for-
enough close enough to see.
There was no people there.
Yeah, of course not.
You know. Today, flying, you have to be at least 1,000 feet, unless you land. So, it was really,
And that was your last flight. You were literally flying back.
I didn't tell anybody in the squadron. I don't know whether the enlistment did or not. And I haven't told anybody all these years until about sometime in the middle of the 90s. I went on a golf weekend with some friends. Played golf on the Morning Bridge at night. They kept me up late. And they started talking about Washington. I finally told them about what I did in Tokyo.
Was that amazing?
That was the first time I said anything about it. But I don't know if they might have court-martialed me or taken my awards away or something.
Well, of course, conversely, they were bringing people.
I was glad I did it though. It was just one of those once in a lifetime things.
Yeah, and so close to the event.
Yeah, it was, oh yeah. It seemed like it was, it had to be done, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know if any other pilot did it. Maybe they did.
As I said, of course, they sent all sorts of people in to go look at the place afterwards. John, you brought along a model. I'm going to go over to the camera, and actually, if you want to hold this, maybe you can tell us just a tiny bit about the plane, and I'm going to operate the camera here for a change and see, because I can zoom in on it a little bit. John has a model. That is a C-47, is that correct?
That's what?
That is your C-47. That's the plane you flew most of your career in the Army Air Corps. So tell us a little bit, just tell us a little bit about the plane while you're...
What?
Can you tell us a little bit about the plane?
Well, the plane was it was reliable. It was the big thing. The
Why don't you turn it a little?
crew chiefs after every flight had to go to work on it every night, so to be in perfect condition every morning.
Do they have one of these in Dayton?
Huh?
Is there one of these in Dayton at the Air Museum? Do you know? Do you know if there is a C-47 in the collection at Dayton?
The date?
Yes, today.
Well, I'll tell you about it. This fellow that made this plane, I gave him the tail number of the plane I flew across to Australia.
Right.
He got it all on except the one number in the front. But he was asking questions about me from my children. And they were asking me, what'd you do? What date did you go? What was the name of your squadron? And so he finally got it all together. He put down, maybe you can read it if you want. He took that picture out of one of the books I had.
That's great.
But this, it says, troop carrier squadron, John J. Coakley, C-47 42-24216, 69th Troop Carrier Squadron, 433rd Troop Carrier Group, 5th Air Force. No, 54th Troop Carrier Wing, 5th Air Force, Southwest Pacific, 1943, 1945.
That's amazing. Thank you for bringing it. That's a very nice addition. John, thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview.
Well, it's something my family's been after me, I think, since I got home. They want me to write my memoirs or do this. I said, okay. I got a book out and I wrote about 3 pages. I kept putting it off and putting it off. I almost put this off. I just said, it would be my last chance, I think. I'd never do it.
Well, I'm not that tough.
Huh?
I'm not that tough.
Well, well, I didn't want to make an idiot of myself. That's the only.
Well, you certainly haven't. This has been a real pleasure, and I certainly appreciate it. Thank you for your service to our country. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you for the
Amazing.
opportunity.
Well, thank you, sir. I'm going to go ahead and cut off and